So this is the old original church.
Let's go. Let's go then.
Original Mission Church. The settlers of St. Augustine moved twice before finally settling at the town's present-day location, south of the plaza in 1572. Franciscan friars arrived in 1573 and later established the first mission of Nombre de Dios, now recognized as the first Catholic mission established in the continental United States. Very cool. And here. Oh man. Look. You know who that is? That's little baby Jesus and his mommy.
Yeah, this is a replica of the original mission. And, it is a real church. We used to have services, we used to have weddings. Until COVID came by,
Yeah.
and that. So now it's just a prayer chapel. They took half of my benches away, left me with the minimum, and spread them out for social distance. Okay, I'd like to welcome you to Mission Nombre de Dios. Any Spanish speakers here? You know what Nombre de Dios mean, right? What?
Name of God.
Name of God, right. Why is it called Name of God? Anybody know? Because those were the first words Pedro Menendez said when he first arrived here.
Pray? No?
When he arrived, he came with a priest, a Jesuit priest, come on in folks, named Francisco Lopez de Grajales y Mendoza. And Father Lopez was a very, very learned man, a scholar. Knew how to write and read, used to be able to speak 3 languages, used to speak Spanish, English, and French. And he placed a cross on the ground. Pedro Menendez knelt, kissed the bottom of the cross, and said, "In the name of God, I proclaim this land for Spain." In the name of God. Father Lopez pulls out his journal, writes everything down. Because all Spaniards did that, specifically the priests. They wrote everything that happened, everything they experienced. That's how we know where the first Mass was held. That's how we know where the first Thanksgiving dinner was held. Everything was written down. As a matter of fact, that's how we know what the original church looked like. And we'll get to that momentarily. So St. Augustine gets established in that field. Come.
Thank you.
No problem. You can have a seat.
No, it's okay.
However, he got strict orders in writing. Yes, those orders are archived in Spain too. That says many things. Among them, establish the settlement and stay away from the natives. Do not interfere. That's why St. Augustine land stayed in that field for 9 months until they could find a suitable place, and they did, downtown. That's where they moved it, away from the village. Okay. In 1577, the first group of Franciscan friars arrived to take over from the Catholic Church, which was downtown, from the Jesuits. Okay. These Franciscans were missionaries. It was headed by a Franciscan friar named Antonio de Escobedo. By that time, the natives and the Spanish got used to it, and new generations were being born. They wanted to intermarry. Okay? So much so that the governor of St. Augustine, governor of Florida, was concerned that there might be some sort of insurrection with the natives. Got scared, so he asked Father Lopez to come up to the village and speak to the natives. So Father Lopez came, spoke to the natives, and convinced them to convert. Okay, and told the natives, listen, We know you want to intermarry with us, with the Spaniards, but you can't because you're not Catholics. But if you become a Catholic, you will be baptized. Once you're baptized, you're a Catholic. Okay, but baptism won't do it justice. Baptism, communion, and confirmation. Then you're a Catholic. Once you do that, you will become a Spanish citizen. You will get the protection of the king, of the Spanish crown. You would then be able to enjoy all the benefits of being a Spanish citizen. And now you will be able to intermarry with us. Well, that sounds good. But the most thing you would like was you don't have to give up your native traditions. You can still keep your native traditions. We're not asking you to give it up. What we're asking you is to become Catholic and accept Jesus as Lord and Savior. Okay. But guess who had a hand in that? Okay. Guess who actually had a hand in converting them? The Virgin Mary. Why the Virgin Mary? Because in the Muguan tradition, the women were honored by the men. Women were held in high esteem to almost a worship. Okay, why was that? While the men went out hunting, they were killers, they were takers of life. Women were the givers of life. And as such, the women controlled the tribe. The men were expected to take care of their women, to protect them, nurture them, and love them. And the men did that. They worshiped their women. When they saw that these Spaniards had a deep love and devotion for the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, so much so that they prayed to her, that they lit up candles to her, that they knelt in front of her, that they decorated their altar of Mary with flowers. They said, hey, maybe being a Catholic's not so bad after all. And that was what actually pushed them over the limit. And they agreed to conversion. Now they needed a church to come and worship. That's what this building came in. And they built the very first mission. After all, the Franciscans were missionaries. The very first mission in the United States, built in 1587, located where we have the Temupan burial grounds right now, right behind the Discovery Globe, behind the planetarium. The first mission in the United States, the start of the mission system. You all seen and heard the missions in California, how they extend one after the other along the coast of California. Well, these came way before that, and then extended from here all the way across to Tallahassee. Then up north, the coast of Georgia and South Carolina, along the Barrier Islands. 140 missions in total. Back in those days, missions came and went. But there had been 140 in total, okay? However, 1595, the one that were established along Georgia and South Carolina were destroyed by the Wali tribe, who insurrected and turned against the natives at the instigation of the English. And those were destroyed in 1595. In 1702, 1706, the entire mission chain from here to Tallahassee was also wiped out because the British raided them, chasing runaway slaves that came from the north to south to get their freedom. Yeah, the first underground railroad ran south. These slaves took refuge inside the missions. The friars gave them refuge inside the mission, hid them. Okay. The natives that live in that area, the Temupan from that area, including the Seminoles, gave them protection. They were overwhelmed by the British Army, and they were found out when they were hidden. So they killed the friars, killed the natives, tortured the slaves, brought them back to the north, destroyed the mission. So by 1706, the entire mission trail was completely wiped out. This mission met its fate in 1728. It was destroyed in 1728. I said built in 1587. Now destroyed 1728. How many years is that? 141 years. The mission Nombre de Dios lasted 141 years. They knew what they were doing when they built it. Just think about it, 141 years. How many hurricanes came through here? And the mission still stood. Including pirate attacks by Drake and Robert Cyril. Of course, those attacks stayed downtown. The mission was witness to that. Okay. However, when the British attacked, it was a 3-day siege. The Spaniards knew by the scouts that they sent out that the British were coming. The British are coming, the British are coming. They were coming to attack. The Spaniards sent a message to Cuba, please send us reinforcements. Well, your reinforcement won't be there for another 2 weeks. So they had to fight it out, 3 days and 3 nights. One of the bloodiest sieges ever recorded in St Augustine history. They fought for 3 days and 3 nights. The citizens took refuge inside the fort. They were locked down in there for their safety while the battle raged. In the end, they ran out of gunpowder and munitions, both sides. So then it became hand-to-hand combat. After everything was finished, the British pulled away, but St. Augustine lay destroyed. Unfortunately, so the mission Nombre de Dios burned to the ground. Okay, even though the battle was downtown, we don't know who destroyed it. We don't know if it was the British or the Spanish by accident. Could have been a flaming arrow carried by the wind and hit the roof, or a misplaced cannonball that hit the building and destroyed it. We don't know, but we do know it was burned to the ground, never to be rebuilt again. So we think. Now the years pass. British take over Florida. The natives that lived here went to Cuba with the Spaniards. Only about 28 natives stayed here. They didn't want to leave their homes. Unfortunately for them, the British brought with them diseases. We don't know if it was smallpox, could have been diphtheria, okay? But eventually they died because of those diseases. Spain took control of Florida again, came back. This whole area was condemned because of the disease, so they stayed downtown. Everything was forgotten regarding the church. Okay. Florida becomes a state, 1821. Big celebration downtown by the fort. They lowered the Spanish flag, raised the American flag, big celebration. What about the church? They forgot it. Generations came and went, the centuries came and went. The church was completely forgotten in time. The property gets bought by Mr. Walter Fraser, 1927. Mr. Walter Fraser, the grandfather of the current owner, used to be mayor of St. Augustine. People knew who he was. So every time he walked around the street, people say, hey, Mr. Fraser, we heard there's a rumor going around that there used to be a church in your property. He would say, nonsense. That's just an urban legend. You've all seen my property. You know I only got 3 buildings there. The spring house, the planetarium, and the shed where I keep all my landscaping equipment, which is where the Discovery Globe is now. Where in the world would a church be? Because the rest of my property is garden, duck ponds, and wooded area. Well, in 1934, when the gardener was digging to plant trees, orange trees to be exact, he digs up a human skull. Looks at it, they call the authorities, very old skull. So Mr. Fraser, who had connections with the Smithsonian Institute, makes a phone call. They sent down a team of archaeologists. They start digging the area where the skulls were found, and they found 134 bodies, 134 skeletons. Each and every one of them was a native. Each and every one of them was a Christian, by the way they were buried, hands across the chest. But what caught their attention was a few of them in the middle had their heads turned the same direction, towards the east. Back in those days, churches had the altar on the east side. So they said, oh, we have something here. Let us expand our search. And they searched further. And guess what they found? They found the post holes where the big poles were dug into the ground to hold up the frame. They dug and they found the remaining wood still burned on the ground. Bingo, we found the location of the church. Okay. Now, 2013 rolls around. The owner now is the grandson, Mr. John Fraser. Decides he wants to rebuild the church again to honor the natives and the friars that gave their lives protecting all these missions. After all, Nombre de Dios was the main headquarters. But he did not want somebody's idea what the church looked like. He wanted the real church again. So, with connections, made a phone call to Spain, found out in Madrid, the Museum of Natural History, and guess what they had? They had all the documents from that time period on the climate control vault. And they, yeah, you have the floor plan of how the church was constructed. Yes, we do. Can you please, we'll pay anything, send us a copy of it, no problem. Why? Wait till you research, we want to rebuild the church, no problem, we'll send you that. And they got a copy of the actual floor plan from that time period of how the church was constructed. Naturally, it was a struggle because it was in Castilian. They had to find someone who can translate that. And the measurements and sketches of what the church looked like, and dimensions, and the type of wood, and how the wood was cut. And they followed that, word for word, without leaving any stone unturned. They followed that to a T, and they reconstructed the church again as it looked. The day it was inaugurated, okay, the bishop who sanctified this church said, I am impressed. This is Nombre de Dios brought back to life again. That's what this is. Unfortunately, it's not located where the original church was, which is where we have the burial ground. That is sacred land. Those bodies were reburied with a Catholic and Native American ceremony, making that area there sacred. So they had to build it here. This is where you're sitting in now, the original church brought back to life. Do you have any questions? As I said before, it's a real church. We used to have weddings, we used to have services, but COVID put an end to that. So they just use it as a prayer church, that's all. Any questions? Thank you. God bless you all. Yeah. Huh? Well, back in those days, they had what is known as a snuffer, and on the other side they had a wick, a long stick. They would light up the wick and come up, and one by one they would light it. Similarly to the way street lights were lit up when they used to be gas controlled.
Good question. Good one. It's thinking. It's like, what can I
Is that cool learning the history of it?
You need to go potty again.